Okay, today we're going to be showing you how to remove paint defects. Defects can be a lot of things in paint, whether it be dirt, nibs, other debris, orange peel, matching factory texture, whatever it may be. The process is all fairly similar in how you do it. This is PPG, the Velocity Series 3000, DTC 3000 clear coat. That is a little under, 24 hours old from when it was sprayed. This clears when you want to get on top of soon. You don't want to let this sit or it locks up pretty tight. So we're going to start with 2000 grit. You can start with a coarser grit like 12 or 1500 if you need to, and if you have enough clear coat on there. So you want to make sure your final mill build of the film is within the tech sheet. So we're going to start here. We got our 2000 on a Motor Guard rock and roll block. And like I said, you can use a coarser grit to start if required. But in this instance, we're just going to hit this with 2000. Then we'll move up to 3 and 5. So we have a fresh painted surface. We're going to start color sanding. So we're going to get some water on here. This is just straight water. You can put a drop of dish soap in to help lubricate the sandpaper as it glides across the surface. So we're going to want to keep this pad nice and flat. We're using this particular block in this instance so it matches the contour instead of a super rigid block. Something you'll notice when you're color sanding is the flatter you get the surface, the more resistance you'll have on your sandpaper. Now, in this particular panel, there was a fair amount of debris. We are not trying to match any texture, so we're just going to go over the majority of this panel. Something to note, you're going to want to stay away from any edges or crevices, either 2000 grit or 1500, if you are able to. So if there is not a defect within that, you can stay a ½ inch away or so. That's usually sufficient. This allows you to get in there with a 3 and 5000 grit and get that refined further. So in color sanding, every step you're doing is you are simply refining the scratch from the previous step. So if you start with 1200, you move up to 1500, then 2000, and if that's where you want to stop, you can. The way that we do it is we sand to 5000. And we reduce the amount of buffing. So you either spend more time sanding or more time buffing. It's kind of your personal preference. But I will say when you sand to 5000, it seems that you get a much better overall finish than if you stop at 1200 and buff with a wool pad. We'll be using a one-step buffing process here, even on black. Then you want to just take a clean microfiber, wipe your sanding slop off. You can use a squeegee as well. Squeegee, pardon me. Now what we're doing here is more considered color sanding than it is just denib and buff. Denib is more what I'm doing right here, keeping that area small, just taking the dirt nib out. So if you notice, I go in straight lines by hand, and then as I finish, I'm going to start to go in semi-small circles. This helps to kind of reduce any stray sand scratches caused by the side or the edge of your block. It just makes the 3 and 5000 steps a little bit easier. I'm just going to wipe that surface clean again. You don't want too much of the sanding slop to stay on while you're color sanding. keep a semi-dry rag nearby as well. So we have a pretty uniformly dull surface here. Majority of the larger paint defects have been removed at this point. So now we're going to move on to refining that sand scratch. Here at Van Hill Coachworks, we use the Trizact system. So we have 3000 grit 3-inch Trizact and a 6-inch DA. For smaller areas with majestic nibbing, we'll use a 3-inch. So the Trizact is a wet system, but not wet. So we're just going to have it so the pad is damp more or less. And then we're going to start out at a relatively low RPM. And we're going to want a sand and a crosshatch pattern. So we're going to go across the whole surface one direction, maintaining about a 50% overlap. And then we're going to switch directions. Again, maintaining that 50 to even say 70% overlap. You don't want to move too fast, and you don't want the speed of the DA too high, or the disc will hydroplane on the surface and not cut. If you look closely, you'll be able to see that the white, that is the clear coat itself, getting sanded. So at this stage, we are simply just refining that 2000 with sand scratch. Now, if you're just starting out in this business, you may not have the proper DA for this. This is a very, very short throw DA made specifically for finish sanding and color sanding. You do want to run the interface pad on this step in most instances, not all, but most. And that interface pad is simply a foam pad, more or less, that goes on the hard backing of the DA, so it contours the surface that you're sanding. And again, with that 3/32 DA, that the short throw prevents pigtails and does a better job of that finish. It does not cut at the same rate that the standard 3/16 throw DA does, or a 5/8. You continue to squirt bottom, clean off your pad. So as you can see here, now we're bringing some gloss back. At this point, you're going to want to inspect that surface for any stray, straight line scratches from the previous hand sanding step. This is more prominent if you use a 1500 grit or a 1200 grit initial cut, but even with the 2000, you can still get them straight line scratches. You want to get them out in the 3000 step, or you'll be going back in with a coarser grit compound and pad setup, or you'll be resanding. So just that is something to keep in mind when you're doing this process. Alright, now we're switching to the 5000 grit Trizact disc. And here's the interface pad I was talking about. It's just simply a cushion, more or less, to follow the contour. Get that pad nice and centered on that DA backing pad. And again, we're just going to wet the pad, not the surface. And something else too to note, never start your DA above the surface. You want it on the surface when you start it, and then start moving immediately. You want to make sure that you're going slightly past where you went with the 3,000, so you can step the pattern out just ever so slightly. And the principle is the same as well. For this step, you want to make sure you have all of your 3,000 grit scratches removed with the 5,000. When we're done with this 5,000 grit step, it'll look very similar to a panel that was cut with an extra cut compound. And a wool pad if you have. You just want to get this nice and uniformly sanded. No straight line scratches left behind, no 3,000 grit scratches left behind, and no pigtails left behind. Periodically, you're going to want to clean your panel of the sand slop. And you'll notice that the water beats off a lot quicker the finer that it's sanded. Something else to note as well is every clear is a little bit different in the way that the color stands. Some are very hard, like the EC530 for example. That's a very soft clear until it is. So get to know the clear coat that you're using, and once you know the characteristics of it, you'll know the best kind to trust. I should note as well, this method is more for a production style of paintwork. On custom work, it's going to be done a little bit different. When you put in a restoration, we'll probably shoot it with 2021 or 2002 PPG clear coat. Then we'll sand it with, say, 1200 and let it sit for a week out in the sun so that clear can fully cure as much as it's going to in that amount of time before we do our final test of color sand. Alternatively, we'll cut it with 800 and we'll flow coat it with another 2 coats on, and then repeat that process of color sanding and buffing it to get that crystal clear, laser straight 10-mile deep finish. But for everyday production work and show car work, this is an excellent method of getting any and all paint defects caused for service. And again, we're sanding a lot more here than we need to be. This is simply for demonstration. For production work, you're going to want to keep your denetting areas as small as possible to reduce your buffing and your sanding. So again, this is for demonstration purposes that we're doing this larger area. There was a fair amount of dust nibs in here, but we could have taken them out in the smaller areas and not going to be included. Okay, we got our surface nice and clean and dry. And again, inspect your surface of the step you just did to make sure that you refine the scratch from each previous step. All right, now we got 3M part number 33039, so one step finish. And we're using the companion pad to that on a Milwaukee 3-inch buffer. Now, in an area this big, we could very well use a 6-inch buffer or a 7-9-inch buffer, but this is what we're using here. So you want to spread your compound out evenly for your polish, and then we're going to start with a slow RPM and get that compound spread out across the panel that the part of the panel that you're buffing. And keep your area small enough that you can keep it wet. General rule of thumb is no bigger than 3x3 is what most manufacturers recommend for the polish and compound. And now we're going to go full trigger on the Milwaukee buffer. This buffer's 3 wheels at 2800 RPM. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 1800 RPM is where you want to be under load. If you're in the market for a small buffer, they do make inexpensive options that are air-powered. Keep in mind, air-powered buffers use a lot of air, so make sure that your air compressor can handle that before you purchase that. We just don't like the air buffers because they're rather loud and annoying to listen to when you're doing this for a few hours. We do have buffers for every situation. We have flex buffers, 9-inch pads. We have Dynabrade buffers, the 6-inch pads. We have the M18 Milwaukee buffers with the 7-9-inch pad as well. You come on a 6-inch on yours too. So besides your panel determines what buffer you're going to want to use. And like I said, we really could have easily used that 6-inch buffer. But we got this one out, so we're using this one today. And your pad selection is also very important. In the 3M product line, the pads match the cap color of whatever compound you're using. So with this one-step product, got a purple cap on, and the purple patch is the companion to use for that particular product. You want to keep that pad nice and flat whenever possible. If you're just starting out in this, be very careful on edges. Everybody new that I train in, I tell them the same thing, that you're going to want to stay away from those edges. If there is a defect that needs to get removed, thread lightly. It's a lot easier to buff it 2-3 times than it is to have to repaint it. So. Keep that pad flat. We're using medium pressure. And the amount of pressure that you apply on a horizontal panel like this is also a direct relation to how heavy the buffer is that you're using. So this little guy is nice and light, so don't have to apply a little bit more pressure. But if I was using my Flex or even the M18 Milwaukee buffer, we wouldn't be having to put as much downforce on the surface. And you want to keep the surface with the compound wet. If it starts to dry on you, it'll start to load up your pad, and you will notice, and your buffing efficiency goes down the drain. So just keep that buffer moving. Same idea as the color sanding with the DA. You want to maintain that 50% overlap. and do a crosshatch pattern, changing directions on every pass of the panel. As you get close to finishing, you're going to start to release pressure of your downforce and let the wind, the buffer itself, kind of just throw it over the surface. Everything in color sanding and buffing is all about refining the previous step sanding stress. And that is what we're doing here. So we're just refining that scratch from the 5000 grit so we have a nice, uniformly gloss surface. And we don't want the compound to dry on the panel, so we'll wipe this off, inspect it. Sometimes you may have to go over it again if you weren't able to get everything cut in the first step. In this instance, that's not going to be the case. So we'll go over this small patch here. Now we'll work this area. Ideally, we would have did this first because our buffer turns clockwise, so it's going to splatter compound onto the surface we just buffed. But we'll live with it here, so we'll buff this out. Again, same principle. Get it spread out so it doesn't swing as bad. And then you buff away. And there is many different ways to color sand and buff a panel. I'm demonstrating what we found to be the most efficient for production paintwork. And also to note too, sanding the 5000 reduces and or eliminates the need to use a wool pad or a very coarse cutting compound on a compounding pad. So if you're, inexperienced, it's also a great way to learn how to buff and reducing the risk of burning through the paint, which is basically when you buff through the clear coat or sand through the clear coat down to the base coat, or in really bad instances down to the sealer or primer. And we only use rotary buffers. DA buffers or long throw buffers are a great choice for some people in the production world. We just don't see the benefit of using them. They tend to be a little slower, but some people swear by them. Again, this comes down to preference. A lot of the old school guys do not like them just because they weren't around back then really, and they're comfortable with what you know. So explore your options, find what you're most comfortable with, but in professional paintwork, 9 times out of 10 you'll see guys using rotaries just because they're faster, they create more heat, in turn they cut faster. So now we're going to go over our freshly buffed surface first, get that compound dust off there, and I should note as well that if you have any built up compound on your panel or say on a fender, a lot of times you get compound on the lip that's the hood side or the wheel well side. You're going to want to get that off at this point in time, because as it dries on there, it's really difficult to get off if you don't have the right product to get it off. It kind of cakes on there like cement almost. So we're wiping our dust off. Now we're going to use a Wizards product. Everybody has their own version of this for the most part. But it's basically a final step. Remove any compound dust and any compound splatter. This is a Wizards product, Mist and Shine, part number 01214. And you're just going to mist it on. Not putting it on heavy. Kind of like a soft sprinkle if it was out in the rain. Then you use a microfiber cloth with the tag ripped off. Make sure it's clean. Doesn't have any debris in it. Use both sides. You're going to use the one side to wipe it wet. Then you're going to flip that rag over and wipe off all the haze left behind from the Wizards Mist and Shine, revealing a beautiful, nice, defect-free surface. Now at this point too, if you do have swirl marks left behind or holograms, you can follow up with a like a 3M ultra fine polish, which is the blue cap. It does a good job of removing them small defects. Or you can use the Wizards similar product like that as well. Whatever system you use, just use the same in that product line. It seems to render the best results. And there you have it.